Good evening. My name is Rob Elkins. I'm a graduate student at Bellevue University in its International Security and Intelligence Studies program. So today's topic is what to do about China, a question for Iran. Time and again, history has shown that it behooves geopolitically weaker states that to have support of a more globally or at least regionally powerful state. The partnership between China and Iran was one such relationship. However, that seems to be a thing of the past as China has become more and more ambiguous in its political thinking towards Iran. However, Iran can ill afford not to have a powerful country by its side, especially today with its nuclear and regional hegemonic ambitions. The problem for Iran, however, is that because of its ambitions, China has, I believe, become either afraid or at least timid when it comes to upsetting the U.S. within the Middle East. Thus, it is less willing to support Iran today. Since the late 1980s, China had previously no problem in this regard, as it often exported nuclear material and hardware along with nuclear-capable missiles to Iran. However, due in great part to U.S. influence, China discontinued such exports. Yet China and Iran still find themselves needing each other. In 1993, when China became a net oil import nation, it looked to its friendship with Iran to help with its oil needs. That oil relationship continues still today, however, it has taken a dramatic downward turn. Because Iran continues with its ambitions, which pits Tehran against Washington and other Western governments, China has started looking elsewhere in earnest for its oil. Because of this political turn in Beijing, other Gulf states in particular have benefited from China's current economic boom. What is ironic, however, is that China actually wants Iran to maintain its antagonistic posture with the West, especially its nuclear ambitions. The reason for this is that while Iran keeps Washington's mind busy on it, there's less chance that the U.S. will concentrate on Chinese economic and political movements in both the Middle East and even more importantly, the Far East. Ultimately, China wants the threat of conflict in the Middle East without the real possibility of such conflict. Any Chinese support to Iran, for example, China's ability to get sanctions that were placed on it by the West watered down to agree that Iran can still economically survive, makes China look good in the eyes of Tehran. On the other hand, by China overtly showing that it is going elsewhere for oil and economic partners and away from Iran, it makes Chinese policy more agreeable to the U.S., or at least that's the way China would think of it. After all, Chinese thinking is practical thinking. If China can work both sides to its advantage, then it is good for Chinese business. And that is where Iran's problem with China really lies. Can it even count on China when there may be a vital need to include oil and economic trade, but just as importantly, in conflict, if a conflict were ever to break out between the U.S. and Iran? Today, that answer would have to be no. China is a good partner as long as China benefits. Once that benefit is gone, China moves on, which seems to be the case more and more today for Iran. Still, can China afford to lose China? Can Iran afford to lose China? Maybe. I believe that China is still Iran's best choice for strong support for all the reasons that have already been mentioned. So, in order for Iran to entice China back, for Iran to entice China to come back, it needs to find avenues into which China sees a need for Iran once again. The first way for Iran to accomplish this endeavor is to apply the same reasoning China and Iran have been partners all along: oil. However, this time, the oil that China would need is oil that Iran can deliver to China over land. What I mean here is that if China and the U.S. were to ever come to conflict, or even if the U.S. just wanted to damage China's oil capacity, its principal option would be to close off oil access to the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. If that were to happen, then China would need to receive its oil from a different source. That source could be Iranian oil over land through the use of Central Asian pipelines to Western China. These are pipelines that would be very difficult for the U.S. to have access to. Additionally, Iran would be the only Middle Eastern state that would send oil to China despite any U.S. or Western objections. This makes Iran look very favorable to China. Also, China has a significant Muslim population in its western territories. Iranian Muslim influence there could go a long way to support Chinese security in the region. However, there are no guarantees that China will jump back on Iran's bandwagon, and Iran should actually not expect China to do so. In that case, it needs to find China's replacement, and the best candidate for that is India, in my opinion. There are several reasons that India would fit well with Iran. First, India is a rising global power following closely along with China. Second, India is an oil-thirsty nation, just as is China, and India already has a strong oil import relationship with Iran. India is, after all, the third largest importer of Iranian oil. And third, India has a better relationship with the U.S. And it is this third reason that could give Iran a friend on the inside with the U.S. One it could not get with China. Also, India in some ways thinks like Iran. Both have a sense of strategic autonomy. Additionally, India, I believe, is not as afraid of the U.S. as is China. Even though Iran and India have had some differences regarding Iran's nuclear ambitions, in the end, it hasn't stopped India from trading with Iran. But for India to take on a supporting role much as China has, there must be some benefits for India. The first benefit would revolve around, surprise, surprise, oil. Since these two states are already trading partners, it behooves Iran to sell oil to India at reduced rates, beating out those rates that India can get from rival Middle Eastern states that surround Iran. Second, just as with China, India benefits from Iran's Muslim influence. So not necessarily within India itself, but with India's greatest rival, Pakistan. Any religiously oriented political help that Iran can provide India regarding Pakistani Muslims, I imagine would sit well with New Delhi. And finally, Iran should exploit the good relationship India has with the U.S. Iran's greatest opposition, along with Israel, is the U.S. If India is supportive of Iran, there is potential for the U.S. to react less dramatically against Iran, provided Iran's peaceful nuclear intentions are made real. And actually, that seems to be the case today, as Iran's new president, Hassan Rouhani, is already talking about making Iran's nuclear program even more transparent. So, what does Iran do about China? It does those things that make China receptive to supporting Iran, once again, as I've already stated. But at the same time, it starts to find China's replacement. Because in the end, there's no telling if China will ever be anything but ambiguous with Iran in the future. Thank you.